Welcome to this great webinar today, and we're going to talk about getting ready for the novel economy with a very special guest, Brian Solis. I'm very, very happy that I have a second chance to moderate an event with Brian. Last time we met, I think, 2 years ago at DigitalK. It was an amazing conversation we had about the future. And very happy that I have a second chance now. And most probably, most of you that are here, you know Brian Solis because he's a very famous world leader, but I'm going to present him anyway. He's now currently a global innovation evangelist at Salesforce. And he's one of the more creative and brilliant business minds of all times, according to Forbes. One of the greatest digital analysts of all time, according to the Facebook CMO. I'm not saying anything about Facebook here. Top futurist and speaker, and one of the 21st century business world's leading thinkers. So, Brian Solis is also a renowned digital anthropologist and futurist. He's also an award-winning author and global keynote speaker. Brian's research, advisory, and presentations humanize the relationship between disruptive innovation and its impact on institutions, markets, and societies. He not only helps audiences understand what's happening and why, he visualizes future trends and inspires people to take leading roles in defining the future they want to see. Brian serves currently, as I mentioned, as a global innovation evangelist and at Salesforce. His work focuses on thought leadership and research and that explores digital transformation, innovation, and disruption. So, Brian, a lot happened during the last couple of months. A great change is triggered. What's next? What's novel economy? We are here to learn how to get ready for this novel economy. I give the floor to Brian. Please post your questions in the Q&A box here in Zoom, and he will be happy to answer after the speech. So the floor is yours, Brian. I will be looking forward to hear more about the novel economy now.
Thank you, Maria. I wish I was there in person. I have such wonderful memories of being in Bulgaria, and I will be there soon. Maybe with, maybe without a face mask, but it is a pleasure to be here. I joined Salesforce recently, and in my time there, I have been busy. I've been busy thinking about the future. I joined just as the novel coronavirus was taking over the world, and that made me stop all of the trajectory of my work, press pause, and look at scenarios of what the world was going to look like as this was happening and after this was happening, and also what we needed to do as organizations, as leaders. And leaders, not necessarily meaning that you have to be at the top, just leaders, people who want to make proactive decisions about the future that we're going to live in. And that introduced an entirely new body of work that is now everything that I'm focusing on at Salesforce. And so I'm going to share my screen here with you, and then I'll be back to answer questions that you may have, or at least pretend to answer them. And in the meantime, come with me on a journey towards this novel economy and the role that we can play in defining the future. I found a picture from DigitalK when I was there. I think it was just 2 years ago, actually. Gosh, it just seems like yesterday. And this event was for me very personal because so many friends, Stefan, Paul, we were all there together, and we were all exploring the future. I gave a presentation on a prelude to innovation, and I think back to that moment and where we were with digital transformation, and now I see a world where digital transformation itself has become disrupted. That overnight, when we shut down the world and we had to send people home for remote work, e-commerce started skyrocketing. People who didn't have access to digital didn't know what to do. All of these things led to a moment where we had to rethink what digital meant. What does it mean to be digital now? And that's what I want to explore with you today. Anybody who's followed my work will know that Walt Disney, in some way, shape, or form, will always seep into my work. If it's about any one of the books that I've ever written, there's always some reference. Either it's blatant or it's hidden as an Easter egg, a reference to Disney. Because Disney grew up and worked in some of the hardest times also in the world. And he acknowledged that the world was always changing, that we couldn't be too comfortable with just any one thing, with any one moment, that we had to constantly imagine a new world as we were also working. Essentially, he was saying to stay curious, to stay imaginative, to stay innovative. I can't imagine a better moment to be creative. This is a moment where we are forced to, many of us, still locked down in our homes, uh, like me, to think deeply about what we want to do, who we want to be, when we can open that door and go back outside. Who are we going to be? What are we going to do? Because I came into this one way and I am choosing to come out of it another way. And the same is true for any business. I understand that right now we have so much to consider in terms of business continuity. We have to stabilize. We have to make sure everybody's taken care of. There's so much that we weren't prepared for, but we're doing a great job. We're doing a wonderful job holding it together. Emotionally, we're holding it together. This is a Control Alt Delete moment. I know we talk about the new normal, but philosophically, if we think about what that means, what does the new normal mean? I wonder if deep down we think that there's going to be some aspect of normal that we really want to return to. I can't wait to go back to dinner. I can't wait to have champagne with my friends in Sofia. I can't wait to do some of the things that I used to do before COVID-19. And we will do those things. But much of normal that led to this moment was part of the problem. That this is probably, and hopefully, the only time where we will be forcefully shut down, where we can think about what can be different moving forward. 2 years ago, I introduced a concept in Bulgaria of what I call digital Darwinism. It's the evolution of society and technology as it impacts behavior. And as it impacts behavior, it changes markets, it changes society, changes behaviors, it changes customs, norms, values. It's constantly changing. For those who've ever used Uber's always referenced, anywhere I go around the world, Uber's always referenced as a company that is truly innovative, or was. It depends on how you view the organization today. But I don't think anybody who studied Uber ever thought it would be disruptive to ambulances and paramedics. And yet it was. That up until the novel coronavirus hit, people were calling Ubers instead of ambulances to take themselves to the hospital because, at least in the United States, it was cheaper and faster. This is the type of innovation that I love to explore. Innovation that changes human behavior. Innovation that changes society. We have been forever disrupted right now during this global pandemic. How are we going to change behavior? If you look at some of the companies leading into this moment around the world, they're called digital natives or born digital companies. Were already disrupting their industries. Casper and Purple in the United States, for example, were incredibly disrupting the mattress industry. The mattress industry is one that has literally been asleep for so many years. That doesn't go away. The opportunities for innovation are still here, but they're open for everybody. Digital natives and incumbents and legacy organizations and those of us who've been around for a long time. There's nothing that says we can't be greater tomorrow than we are today. There's nothing that says that we can't chase new ideas. In fact, the world is counting on it. Perhaps you've seen this cartoon. Perhaps you've seen that famous, it said, I think it was a poll, who's driving your digital transformation? And COVID-19 was what everybody said was guiding their strategies now. I put an informal poll out on Twitter just to sort of get the conversation going. And I also included COVID-19 in the results, or as one of the options. And as you could see here, it's what everybody selected when I asked who's leading your digital transformation. Of course, that's what everybody was going to pick. But if you look at the other options, this is what we have to focus on. We could be driven by a virus for a little while. Obviously, it disrupted everything. But look at the other options, because they're so profound and they're going to be with us moving forward, just like COVID-19 is going to be with us for the next, until there's a universal treatment or a vaccine. It's going to be with us for a while. Shareholders have been, up until this point, and probably still are, guiding much of the decisions that we make, because it's literally in their interests to do so. Customers, well, I think that honestly is the answer. That's who should be leading our digital transformation. And in some cases, we're always going to have to deal with politics externally and internally, but it's customers that should be guiding our digital transformation. I think up until the moment where we were shut down, there were such visible signs that the world was changing because of digital, that it wasn't just how do we have a better e-commerce strategy or how do we have a better service or support strategy. It was, how do we create a life that's physical and digital? How do we create a customer journey? How do we create an employee journey that's native to this new generation of customers? Because digital is it's so native to how we live life. One of the challenges that we have is that when it comes to incumbent companies or existing companies, you have people who are making decisions about the future of the organization driven by, well, COVID-19, but also driven by shareholders, stakeholders. And then you have this new genre of customers and employees who are emerging and evolving. And then the gap between them is just great. And it's only continued to grow. I used to talk about out of touchness as a pandemic before the pandemic. But I ask you, and this is coming from someone who spends all of his time, all of my time studying the future. What's happening right now is transformative. We're witnessing a new future happening right now. And so this is a really important time to focus on right now, to really pay attention, to set aside our beliefs, our own cognitive biases, and really pay attention. because it's going to give us new inspiration moving forward. So what is this novel economy? The novel economy has been some of the most passionate work that I've done in a really long time, and it has been the primary focus of my work at Salesforce. We generally, as a society, are looking at the world. We're referring to the future. We're referring to these days as sort of the new normal. It's going to be normal for a while, maybe for a long while, to wear a mask. Some parts of the country, that's just already part of their everyday culture. But the new normal is more than that. The new normal is something without a playbook. The new normal is something without best practices or case studies that we could follow or that we could use for inspiration to guide us. The novel economy is a name I wanted to give the new normal so that I could think about it both optimistically and productively. Because it literally is a novel economy. Inspired by the novel coronavirus, novel means new and unusual. That perfectly describes these times. They're new and unusual. I don't know. What are we going to do? I know that we're going to react. I know we're going to do the best we can while we react. But I wanted to give a name to this new normal so that we could start moving forward. And I broke it down into 3 phases. If you want to know more, I'm writing more about this right now, but if you want to know more about the novel economy, you could just Google it, and then also ZDNet or my name. My colleague and I, Vala Afshar, we spent a series of, well, a lot of time talking, but one of the conversations turned into 2 articles. And one of those articles is where I introduced the concept of the novel economy. And it breaks down technologically and then also philosophically how we think about moving forward in 3 phases. But for the time that we have today, I wanted to share at least what those 3 phases are. Phase 1 is where we are at the moment. It's all about survival. It's the reaction. It's the pursuit of stabilization. It's business continuity. It's incredibly emotional because we were so shocked. We're reacting. We've had to make some really hard decisions. There are probably harder decisions to make as we move forward. But this can only last so long because we have to move into phase 2. Phase 2 is what you might call the next normal, which is we are going to live with this virus for some time. It's really, until science comes through. What are we going to do about it? I know that I am not going to stay here and do the same things that I was doing before. So I'm going to operate in this new normal. I'm going to stabilize this new normal, but I'm also going to be open to looking at how I can create everything new products and services for these times, new models, new journeys for these times, new mindsets for these times. So phase 2 is alive. So survive, alive. Phase 3 is thrive. This is innovation. This is looking at all of those opportunities while we're operating as normal or the new normal, that we're opening the doors for new possibilities, that we're also thinking through strategically at the C level. What are these scenarios that we need to start planning for? As a futurist, I could tell you, I've studied the future of work, the future of markets, the future of everything. In fact, I think in most of my reports, the state and future of was always part of the title. I can honestly admit that none of my research included plans for a global pandemic. And that is part of the challenge that we face moving forward, that a global pandemic isn't the only disruption that we have to think about. There's constant disruption. There's disruption of competitors. There's disruption of new technologies that are going to change customer and employee behaviors. There's always something that's on the horizon that we have to plan for. So now we need to bring the idea of futurology, a role of a futurist within the organization, to plan out these scenarios. Besides a pandemic, how do we need to think moving forward? What are the likely scenarios? Because again, this is unprecedented. There is no playbook for moving forward. We're literally writing that playbook right now. McKinsey released a report, for example, on how CPG companies should think about at least the next several months in terms of retail, in terms of consumerism. And their scenario planning showed here, for example, well, what's going to happen once we shut down, once there's economic shock, once we start to come out of this crisis, once we start managing the next normal, so that we can make very strategic decisions about what we do, what we don't do, and what we need to do. And this is really important because otherwise we get really stuck in both rigid and very safe maneuvers. And that isn't going to help us emerge from any of this as a leader. I think this is going to be one of those times where a lot of organizations are going to just be safe. But, and I understand that, trust me, I understand that. There's small miracles every day in just staying alive. But the world is changing. The pandemic is changing everybody. That means that change is fueling evolution. And as evolution continues to evolve, that means that we either are in line with how the world is evolving or we're ahead of it. If we are safe, then the world is getting ahead of us. That means that we have to start making decisions about the future right now. And those decisions have to be bold. I can't say it any other way. We have to be bold now. This is how we set ourselves apart from everyone. Imagine, if you will, March 1st, 2020. That's when I would say that the behavior of people around the world, more so in certain countries, but we just say globally, around the world, as of March, we started to change. And that data that tracked behaviors, that tracked interests, that tracked conversations, that data is quite revealing about the new world in which we're living. I wrote an article a week or two ago about this concept of hiring an AI futurist. And I know people, what is Brian talking about? AI futurists? It's the idea of scenario planning using new data in real time to make decisions about what's next. As a human species, trying to balance all of this disruption in our professional life and also in our personal life. Come on, we can't talk about this as if our personal lives haven't been disrupted either. We have to make decisions fast. They have to make great and bold decisions now. We could use some help. AI algorithms, for example, at Salesforce, our Einstein team published a report of that was the result of incredible research. It was called the AI Economist, and it explored how AI could explore tax policies that were fairer and more equal to people in ways that humanity hasn't been able to do on its own. And the results were pretty impressive. And that research inspired me to think, well, couldn't we take that same concept, that same motivation, and apply algorithmic models to helping us understand these new patterns as they unfold? So this brings me back to 2 years ago in Sofia, where I introduced the concept of a prelude to innovation. And a prelude to innovation isn't just about how do we be more innovative. A prelude to innovation was an invitation to say, or an invitation to belong in, something more personal. Before we can go and change the world, we have to change ourselves. That we came into this pandemic a certain way, let's just call it normal. And we're going to lead this pandemic. We're going to lead this world. We're going to lead this novel economy. We have a choice in the way that was informed this way, or in a way that was informed by and also inspired by everything that's happening right now. I want to share these three concepts with you. For those who saw me live, I talked about these differences. For those who were just meeting for the first time, these are really important because I can tell you that even coming into this moment, companies really have a hard time understanding what true innovation is, because a lot of times when they do something new, it looks like innovation. But often it's just iteration. So iteration is, say, for example, taking new technologies, automation, artificial intelligence, RPA, machine learning, and improving processes. So we're doing the same things better, but to us it looks innovative because we've never used AI before. This is really cool. And look, it is really cool. But we have to understand that we need, in these times, a parallel roadmap of iterations. So we have to improve things that were. Remote working, e-commerce are two examples of that. Just simply digitizing, though, is not enough. We also have to introduce opportunities for digital business model innovation. These are new times. I guarantee you that people are going to be more attached to these devices than they were coming into this pandemic. And they were already pretty addicted to them. New behaviors are being sown. So innovation is doing new things that creates new value. And then disruption is the result of both of these things, doing new things that make the old things obsolete. I guarantee you that these times, the next 12, 24, 36 months, we're going to witness some of the greatest inventions, the greatest innovations that the world has ever seen. I invite you to be part of it. I wanted to share with you a funny example. This is a parking sign in New York. This is iteration. This sign, if you look at it, is a visual metaphor for normal. I don't think anybody who designed this sign actually had to read it in the moment when they were trying to determine, can I park here? They're in their car, people are honking or yelling at them. So the city of New York invited people to think about, well, let's improve the parking sign. I think that's part of the problem where we get into iteration, is that we're just trying to improve what we know instead of saying or asking different questions. What would someone who looks at this device all day long, what would someone like that need to see to help visually communicate to them immediately whether or not they could park here? Because then you're not thinking about a parking sign, you're actually thinking about visual engagement in an entirely new way. And this doesn't just apply to parking signs, it's just asking different questions to get different answers. So when we look at the lens of the future, when we start scenario planning, when we start making decisions about what to do now in phase one and what we need to do in phase two and then phase three of the novel economy, what's that future that you want to see versus the future that we're actually moving toward? Because they're very different. In 2020, a lot of things have been canceled. I think a lot of people are just waiting for 2021, to be honest. But imagination is not canceled. Creativity is not canceled. Invention and innovation is not canceled. In fact, you're basically being begged to think differently, to reimagine the future. And the best way to do so is to put the human being at the center of all of this. As a digital anthropologist, humanity has always been at the center of my work, but I've never been more inspired than I am today, because humanity has been disrupted. You've been disrupted. I've been disrupted. Today, I wanted to introduce a new concept that I'm working on, which is the last time I saw you in just 2018. My goodness, it was just so recently. I was talking about Generation C that stood for connected, Generation Connected. And I was talking about placing Generation C at the center of your digital transformation strategy. So our customers, our employees, that they were becoming more and more connected. And as they were becoming more and more connected, they were changing how they made decisions, how they were behaving, how they thought, what they valued, how they connected with one another. And that understanding that generation was looking beyond demographics, centennials, millennials, Generation X, and looking at society as one larger psychographic to say, okay, if my group of connected customers, whether they're 25 or they're 45 or they're 65, are making decisions similarly, what can I learn from that to improve touch points, to improve how we work, to improve the technologies that we invest in, to improve the services that we deliver or the products that we sell? And now that's still true, but now in a pandemic, society is it's only continuing to evolve. And so I also wanted to give it a name. And this one I want to talk about because this one is so inspiring because it's so profound. When we all shut down, when we all got scared, when we were all affected not only by COVID-19, but also its wrath on the economy around the world, when we started to know people who got sick, hopefully the number of us who knew people who were affected beyond just being sick is minimal, but it was life-changing. When you couldn't just go to the store like you used to for the simplest of things, it became what psychologists refer to as a somatic marker. It's an emotional bookmark that will always be attached to these times, and it will trigger very emotional, visceral responses when we think about this. This is Generation N, and I believe that this generation was born in March. I joke and say that its parents are COVID-19, but it's also quite serious. This new consumer is going to be forever affected by this pandemic. In the United States and anywhere around the world where toilet paper is still a thing, we'll never look at this the same way again. We'll never look at sanitizer the same way again. This is an example of the effects of a somatic marker. And it will forever affect and influence how we make decisions. And to me, why Generation N is so important is that as of March, we can start studying what's important to them and how they're behaving, what they value. And I can tell you that their values are going to change. Our values are changing. Where we spend our money, how we spend our money, or whether we start saving as we can. It's all because of this disruption. The best thing that we can do is to prioritize studying the customer to improve and to introduce new experiences that are going to meet their needs. The customer is accelerated their use of digital, their use of services that are digitally centric, and they are going to emerge from this not only digital first, but maybe even mobile first, definitely digital native. And this is important because in psychology, we talk about behavior change, that it takes on average 66 days for a person to adopt new behaviors that are automatic or that are second nature. You don't think about them. So subconsciously, you do certain things. We've already started to see that things like sportswear, working out equipment, uh, around the world, recreational vehicles, where money is being spent is beyond essential items. Really interesting. People are claiming. In fact, Salesforce had research that showed that experiences are more important than the products or services that we offer. I ask you to make a shift then to understanding generation and generation novel by adding an apostrophe s to customer's experience to see it as theirs, the customer's experience. Because when we look at it from the outside in, we can actually see how the world is changing. 84% of customers say that experience that a company gives them is as important as its products and services. And an experience is personal. I mean, it's a word that we use in business all the time, whether it's customer experience, user experience, employee experience. Experience means simply an emotional reaction to a moment. It's how you respond to something. And that is at the heart of our iteration and our innovation strategy. What are we going to do to improve what exists? And what are we going to do to introduce something new for this new customer in this new time? Because that's the way that we have to think. I refer to it as a relevance revolution because relevance means that you're trying to be important to, significant to, interesting to, beneficial to someone. And that means that we have to know what it is that they value. And in a time where values itself is being rewritten, what do people value? What are the new norms in society that are evolving? These are the types of questions we have to ask so that we can answer them. Data, AI, machine learning, those are important, but automation is also important. Digitizing our processes is really important, but also looking for new ways to deliver great experiences is really at the heart of the matter. This is a drawing that represents much of the thinking. I'm in Silicon Valley that we see in so many startups around here that it's called jumping the curve. So what you're looking at is just a traditional bell curve of any type of market adoption of something new. Starts off with early adopters, it grows to early consumerism, mass consumerism, and then it just sort of tapers off, or just becomes normal. But in this new world, in this novel economy, we're going to have to adopt a mindset that's constantly looking at customer behavior as it evolves, because it's going to continue to evolve. And I don't think that this pandemic is the last disruption that we have to think about. We already see examples of Mother Nature disrupting first locales, but who knows what's next? We just always have to be prepared. And so jumping the curve is this concept as you're introducing something that is, and it starts to become normal, we have to already think about what's next. So for example, in Silicon Valley, a lot of really smart people are thinking about what's the next thing. So phones have been around for a really long time in technological terms. So what's the next thing? Is it AR, VR? What's the next interface that's going to change humanity? So while we don't have to answer that question right now, what we do need to build into our way of working and our way of thinking is constantly introducing that next new thing of products, services, and experiences so that we're always staying ahead, so that we're always innovating. And to do that is, well, it's really human. It's how we work. It's how we think. It's how we train our employees. It's how we engage our employees. It's what we ask them to do. It's where we're going beyond mission statements and vision statements, beyond the core values that we so proudly display on our walls. Where are we going? And why? And how do you remind me every single day in that engagement, in that visualization, in how we work together, and how you reward me? That's culture. We talk about culture as being so important, especially in innovation. But I don't know that we even know what the word itself means. But this is a time to figure it out. This is time to actually define it. In my research over the last decade, and I've formally studied innovation, I've formally studied digital transformation, customer experience. I always ask in each of my reports, what are the challenges that you face as you try to be more innovative? I also ask, what are the things that help you become more innovative, for example? It's always interesting to me that culture was either number one or at the top of both questions. Culture is the number one or one of the top catalysts for innovation, meaning that people felt empowered to try new things, to take risks, to fall down and get back up. In fact, forgive me for not knowing the source of the quote right now, but there is a famous quote that says that failure is not about falling down. Failure is staying down. And it's about creating a culture that allows for people to fall down. We help each other back up and we learn from those moments so that we can push our way forward, that we could open new directions, that we could fail forward, as we say in Silicon Valley. My friends at Gaping Void Culture Design out of Miami, they've developed a really interesting, actually a management system. It's a formal business management system that helps organizations create the culture you want to see in order to create the future that you want to have. They talk about it as this future motivating state. And so we have to be able to define where we're going. So right now, in our scenario planning, even though we're just in phase one of the novel economy, moving towards phase two, we should be able to articulate to our employees and to our customers and to our shareholders and stakeholders, what does that future motivating state look like? Because once we can articulate it, then we can move people toward it. We can motivate people toward it. Articulating that then means that we have to articulate and socialize what our beliefs are. This is so important because what Gaping Void has done so well is that they've essentially broken down into an art and science. How people work is a lot like how people live, right? So if you go to your favorite sporting event, your favorite football team, for example, there are norms and behaviors that are associated with that team or that league. At work, right now, people have adopted certain beliefs and certain norms, either because that's the culture you have, or that's just because what they do as what's normal. But you can define what that is. You can inspire what that is. And that's what that future motivating state is, combined with the articulated beliefs that it's beyond our mission statement, beyond our core values. It's this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there, and this is how I reward you for moving in this direction. Because in that articulation, you are creating new norms and you are creating new beliefs that change behaviors. This is how we create a culture towards innovation. So I'll leave you with this, and then we'll go to questions and answers. What if we choose right now, you and me, what if we choose right now to not see this pandemic as a disruption to our trajectory? What if we choose to see this disruption not as something that affected our plans? What if we choose to see this time as an opportunity to think differently, as an invitation to think differently? what would you do? Because this is that exact moment. This disruption has been a great equalizer. Everywhere around the world, everybody has been affected by it. Our response is what's going to define us moving forward. This is a time to rethink, reinvent, reimagine a new future that we want to work toward and bring people along with us in this new direction. It's an opportunity to find new purpose and new meaning, and nothing is more important than the people around us. Generation N is an important generation to study. The somatic marker that's creating one great global society is an opportunity to be more empathetic, to understand what it is, to connect with them and how they're behaving and making decisions so that we can do things that matter, to be the truth, to do what's right, and to be the light in a time that is dark. As my friends at Gaping Void say, that innovation is actually just a code word for leadership. And leadership isn't a title, it isn't a role, it isn't a job description. It's in all of us. We all have to step up to think differently, to challenge one another, to keep pushing forward, to be resilient, to say, you know what, fine, I was disrupted. I'm sure I'll be disrupted again in the future. I have to live. I have to live, and I want to live greatly. I want to live in a way that takes all of the assumptions that held us back before, all of the devices that held us back, and break free and move forward and create a future that is better for everyone. This is our time. Thank you. And let's move forward and create the
Thank you,
future we want to
Brian.
see.
Thank you, Brian. Really, really great presentation and great thoughts behind that. I was thinking about what you just said about the 66 days. And we had more than 66 days. What behaviors changed? What are the top behaviors that changed during those 66 days?
Well, that's the inspiration for a lot of the research right now. In fact, in those 66 days, that's what led to the idea of Generation Novel or Generation N, was that I was starting to see behaviors change. For example, Salesforce published the global shopping index that you could look at that showed already, even though the research ended in Q1 2020, you could start to see that in March specifically, that everything shifted electronically. Where money was being spent was shifting dramatically. So you could see just in watching behavior for a few weeks that the change was going to be dramatic. And then as they stayed in shelter in place, data is now starting to come together to show exactly how people are changing. But I can tell you, ask yourself, how have you changed? I personally, I've developed new routines that I didn't have 67 days ago. uh, and it's an invitation to formally start studying all of this stuff. So at Salesforce, one of the things that we're doing is publishing through Tableau our data visualization around all kinds of things. How is work changing? How is shopping changing? But essentially, any organization has access to data, or should have access to data, where we should start really focusing on this. In fact, having a data-centered culture is going to be very key in making swifter decisions about how do we move forward differently. So the answer to your question is we have to. That's exactly what we need to do. Leaving this session today is go figure that out.
Thank you so much. And one other question I have, well, if people have some questions, please put it in the Q&A section. We have 10 more minutes to finish this webinar. Meanwhile, I will ask my question because I've been very curious about innovation and how to build the culture of innovation. So to all the leaders that want to build a culture of innovation, but still struggling to find the right way to do that, what your advice would be?
Well, to give a shout out to my friends at Gaping Void, go to gapingvoid.com. They published this report that I read that was so inspirational. It's called, it's basically, it's a CEO study that they examined some of the most successful business leaders over the last several years. And it turns out that culture was actually one of the strategies that those business leaders all shared. And it also showed that if you have, they called it a high purpose culture, which means essentially just, do you have purpose behind what you're trying to do? And does everybody know where we're going? Could everybody articulate where they are going and why? And so these high purpose cultures not only helped improve how people worked, they showed that every one of those companies with a high purpose culture actually outperformed the markets, which meant that they were actually super profitable. And so that's where we're all trying to go. And in the report, it talks about how to create a culture. But I think most importantly, it's to understand that coming into this pandemic, Gallup research around the world showed that most employees, I think the number was 80%, most employees were either disengaged or actively disengaged, which meant that they weren't just not happy at work, that they were actually trying to make other people unhappy at work. Uh, and so that, none of that was good. So what can
Thank
people
you.
do? Yeah, last point is, what can people do? Just like we're studying Generation N as to how their behaviors are changing, let's ask our employees how they're feeling. It's probably good to check in with them anyway, because these are hard times. But how are they feeling?
Definitely. Right. We have the first question, a couple of questions here. First question from Lydia Verbanova. As we hear that innovation is the key, what should we do in industries that are the most affected by COVID-19, like tourism, performing arts, etc.? What would innovation help to replace the live theater with streaming or something else?
That's it's funny. I just got an email with that same question recently. It's a theater that is in Geneva, a very famous theater, and they were asking for advice as to what to do. I think that's something to consider, is to look at. I mean, people need art now more than ever, but I think the answer is yes. That we have to explore virtual experiences. And then we have to look at what could those virtual experiences be beyond just a traditional stage performance, for example. How can we deliver an experience that's incredibly unique to this environment? This is a unique environment. What can we do that's different than just translating something live to the screen? I think the answer in that is innovation. There's ways to do things that are novel that we hadn't yet considered. Travel, that's I've been thinking about this one a lot, because this is a beautiful world that we live in, and I'm not I I don't think society itself is going to do itself any good by not enjoying and savoring everything that this world has to offer. But what we do need to do is consider, what types of virtual experiences can we deliver to people that show the world in which we live in a way that we haven't been able to do before, to allow them to immerse themselves in a place or a thing or an experience that can only come to life digitally, but also reimagine. This is important. uh, I wrote an article that you could read in Fast Company called "Every Company Has to Become a Digital Health Company." And it was inspired by our work here around work.com. Essentially, you have to redesign the world while this pandemic is with us, while COVID-19 is with us. And by redesign the world, I mean, how can we boost travel experiences that are safe and welcoming for people? We're already in the cruise industry. Reimagine filtration, dining experiences so that it's healthier and safer for people. And those bookings are going through the roof already. So how can we imagine destinations or just travel in general so that people feel safe? What's the check-in process look like at a hotel that's safer? What's dinner look like? What's this excursion look like? And then communicate that. Communicate these new experiences, help people feel safe, and also help people feel like this is exactly what they need and what they want right now.
Thank you. Okay, Diliana Dobrinova, what's your opinion on purpose? How should each brand find its purpose and act upon it in an authentic way rather than just jump on the COVID trend?
I love that question. Thank you. If you want to smile, there's a video. I think you could just search in YouTube. Every company sounds the same. It's a long video that shows a series of commercials from all kinds of different brands. They're all saying the same things, basically that they want us to know that they're with us, that we're all in this together. I appreciate those brands' intent. I understand that it's not easy to market right now or sell, but it doesn't mean that people aren't open to messaging, and it doesn't mean that people aren't open to buying. All it means is the answer to your question, which is purpose. I think the greatest source of purpose is to understand what matters to someone else and to see how that aligns with what I stand for as a brand. I think it's also a time to rethink what the brand is. And this is an invitation for all companies to look at your pillars, your brand pillars, and to say, does this hold up to right now? This is one of the reasons that I was inspired to think about focusing on Generation N, is because I want to find purpose that connects with that somatic marker. Can I connect with somebody who is disrupted, scared, anxious, maybe hopeful? What's important to them? And then look at what I stand for as a brand and look at how I can be relevant and meaningful to this new generation of consumerism. I think it's a good exercise to find purpose. As a plug, my newest book, Life Scale, actually is an exploration of purpose toward creativity, and there are some exercises in there that could help.
It's in my list, the book, so looking forward to read it. Stanislav Nakov, what do you think about the future of cryptocurrencies? Are they primed for success, or are they the future of finances, or rather just a temporary fad?
Man, that one's hard. That's a very important question. In fact, for those who know Monty Mumford, if you want to see the answer, I had a real great conversation with him last week. He was in the UK, and he's all in on cryptocurrency. A lot of our friends in Silicon Valley are in cryptocurrency, and also blockchain, which is very important. The answer is that cryptocurrency is not going away. In fact, in many ways, it's starting to show when we look at the world from a political standpoint, and also as we see this economic disruption that's taking place, that cryptocurrency has no motive, it has no political affiliations, really. It is its own universe. What scares most people, though, is because it is so new and so different, and because it's not necessarily government regulated or government backed, that it's easier to just not think about it. But I can guarantee you that the people who are trading in cryptocurrency today are finding ways to create not just new forms of currency, but new forms of transaction, new forms of trade, new forms of commerce. I think it's here to stay, and I think I think organizations should at least look at blockchain for supply chains and for all kinds of applications, insurance, finance, because it is a form of digital transparency that we need to adopt.
Thank you very much. We have time, I think, for one more question, unfortunately, and this is the last one, Emilian. And what is the role of decentralized technologies like blockchain in this transformation to human-centered solutions and culture? It's a bit related to the crypto, but yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, these last two questions are really telling because the people who are asking them are already starting to think about the future. Blockchain is hard because it in of itself needs education to people making decisions. being associated strictly to cryptocurrency isn't helping it. I would say that anybody who is a champion for blockchain should talk about blockchain in terms of both application and also benefit to stakeholders, so people who are involved in blockchain in some way, shape, or form. And this is important because in there is the answer, right? The purpose of blockchain is to be transparent and accountable. We live in a world that that has shown us that transparency and accountability aren't things that a lot of people like because it's easier to hide certain things. But I would say that honestly, I I I couldn't wait, or I can't wait for transparency and accountability to be front and center of everything. I think if we can show customer benefits, if we could show ROI, it's going to help. It should be part of your purpose. You should want to be more authentic. You should be more accountable and transparent. But I think we have to align blockchain with our human values moving forward.
Thank you so much. We have two more questions. I don't know if it will be fine for you to send it to you later on so you can answer, or is it fine with you so people get the answers?
We could try.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much. It was, I think, an amazing journey with you today. We learned a lot. We're looking forward to the novel economy. I believe there's a lot of things that are coming soon, and transformation is really fast. So let's enjoy the ride, like you said.
Let's change the world. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.